Hey guys, how you doing tonight? James is actually at a conference tonight, the third annual Northeast Wisconsin House of Worship Safety and Security Symposium, and he's going to be interviewing a couple of guys. So just wanted to do a quick introduction, get us loaded up here, and just want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. As everybody is starting to log in, I'm seeing people pop up now. So here we go. We're going to go with James in Wisconsin. Hey, James, you there?
I am. I can hear you. It was actually 62 degrees up here today.
Yeah, it was 71 here in Memphis. So it was nice.
But there's still 2 feet of snow outside, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure how that is. All right. Well, I'm sitting here with Dave and Troy from ACG. So thanks for joining me tonight, guys.
Absolutely.
I appreciate your time. I'll just start off by, if you want to introduce yourselves and tell us what ACG stands for and what you guys do.
Sure. I'm Dave Skinner. I am the president and COO of Applied Countermeasures Group. Troy Zukowski here. He's the CEO of ACG. We started this Applied Countermeasures Group back in 2015, and we work a lot with churches, places of worship all over the United States. What we do is we go in and we do complete physical and operational security risk assessments. Okay. We identify their vulnerabilities, and then we put a plan together to mitigate those vulnerabilities. Once that's done, we then have the information, the foundational information that we need to write their emergency action plans. How do you respond to an active threat, emergency medical situation, severe weather, lost child, power outage, gas leak, you name it, we write the emergency action plans for all of those situations. And this is part of a program that we've developed called our POWER program. POWER stands for Places of Worship Emergency Response. The next step is to not take those books, not take those emergency action plans and put them on a shelf, but to actually train with that information so people on the staff that are part of either the team or the organization know how to respond to these emergencies, so they're not reacting to them. So we then take them to that next step of training on emergency action plans. And it's a 12-month process. We don't do it overnight. We don't go in there one day to do a seminar and say, boom, you guys are good to go. Over a 12-month period, we go back every month, anywhere from 4 to 8 hours at each of those training segments that we do to get through the entire program. And then once they're through that program, they get certified through our Powerhouse certification program. It greatly reduces their liability. They have a sound plan in place. They understand how to respond to emergencies, reduces their liability, helps with insurance rates, but most of all, it prepares them to respond to emergency situations.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, and I think, James, it's like we were talking earlier before the podcast started off, we deal with a lot of churches, anywhere from 30 people upwards to 60,000 and everything in between. So sure. Looking at programs that are scalable to meet the different audiences and congregations, if you will. But one time we hear it over and over, and we call it the spinning wheel syndrome. So many times people reach out and say, hey, can we get active threat training? Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, yeah, sure, we could do that. But if you don't take a foundational approach and you just kind of go after that one spoke of that spinning wheel, you just feel you're missing a lot of stuff. So it's like you really have to, okay, let's draw a line in the sand. Mm-hmm. First of all, have a little self-reflection of where we're at. What's the culture of your church? What's the commitment level for pastors, your deacons, your elders, whatever boards that is? And, what's their vision or their goals, and then really work with that. And no two churches are the same. If you're working with a Wells Lutheran here and a Wells Lutheran there, even between the Wells Lutherans, it's going to be different. No different with the Pentecostal or any of the other, denominations we've worked with. But, we all have the same problems that we're facing every day. And it might not be the quick button active threat. It might be the stuff such as a child custody issue. Do you have that check-in, check-up, and check-out process? Is that, valid? And I don't care how big of a church you are, congregation, the core principles are still applicable to help us with safety and security programming.
That's kind of cool that you made that point, because a lot of times, like all of us actually get calls from churches that are like, hey, can you just help us with active shooter, or
Right.
can you help us with this, or can you help us with that?
Right.
And it's like, well, I know for our church, for 10 years of doing it, probably 70% of what we responded to, our team responded to, is medical.
Right.
So it's like, okay, the very minimal amount that you're going to respond to a tactical, or firearm is probably, percentage wise minuscule. So I think that's cool, because a lot of companies, or at least that you guys focus on that, because a lot of companies are just like, okay, we'll train you in this module
Right.
and this module.
Yep. And then they're out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we have that talk right up front when they call us for active shooter training. We like,
Sure.
look, we understand, because they're getting some heat, maybe getting some pressure from people in their congregation. Are we prepared for this? When they see stories on the news of active shooter events, they're like, what would we do if?
Sure.
So we go in there, we say, yes, we can train you on active threat, active shooter, but understand that your risk of having an active shooter event in your church is way down here.
Right.
The consequences are way up here. So yes,
Right.
we'll cover that, but the risk of you having a medical emergency in your church is way up here. And
Sure.
the consequences are also up here. So let's spend more time understanding how to effectively respond to emergency medical situation, making sure that you have first aid kit, you have an AED, you have some trained staff members
Right.
that are willing to step up and help with those types of situations. And like Troy said, it's the spinning wheel syndrome. It's just one spoke in the wheel. We'll address every spoke, but we got to draw a line in the sand, like Troy said, and we got to go one spoke at a time. We'll
Right.
get through it all, and you'll have all the training you need to be able to respond to any type of emergency. But when we're done, you're going to be responding to emergencies and not reacting, hoping for
Sure.
a positive outcome.
Yeah. Yep. And like you said, it's been really interesting, the different things you get exposed to when you start looking at this, just not on the company side, but the safety and security team that it's just things that you would have never thought you'd be dealing with on a daily basis. Like, an organization that wants
Sure.
to, step up and volunteer stuff, and what systems or places are put in, anything from, like we talked about, child custody issues, or
Absolutely.
just all different. It's quite interesting. So
I've actually personally, I've regularly dealt with that, the child custody issues,
Right.
where mom and dad separated, and
Mhm.
now all of a sudden dad's not coming to the church, mom is, and mom and parents are like, hey, how do I handle this? What do I if he doesn't come in and take the kids?
Right.
And I know for me, a lot of times, like, I'll sit down, just one-on-one, I'll say, okay, 5 minutes in church between services really isn't the best time
Right.
to be assessing this,
No,
but
absolutely not.
did he threaten you? Did he say something? Did he do something to threaten the children? What's, do we need to trespass him and all that stuff?
Right.
So I think, honestly, as far as churches go, as we reach out to the community and we offer something to the community, right? We're bringing in folks that have baggage and have those situations where they're like, that's just the inherent nature. So
It is, and we're all coming to a place to heal, right?
Right.
It's just how we heal might be a little different structured for some people.
Sure.
As long as they play within the rules or whatever. So,
Hey, you're
right,
bringing people in from all walks of life under one roof.
Right.
And it is your community all coming together to follow their faith. And churches are a soft target.
Right.
And they have to have open doors. But we can put systems in place that are not invasive,
Right.
that are going to steer people away. Just to give you one example, we had a church call us saying, hey, we're thinking about buying a metal detector for our front door. And
Yeah.
we're going to hire a TSA screener to screen people coming into our church. Do you want to go to that church?
Disclaimer: TSA, you do a great job.
Yeah. But
But-
do I want to go to that church? I want to be screened to get into my church.
Right.
No, there's a much better approach to take.
Sure.
So that's what we do. We stop that wheel from spinning,
Right.
and then we bring everybody together and we explain our process, we explain our system, and then we start them. Step one.
Cool. And I think, like what you had said, James, too, one of our goals is, we both come from a faith background, and like a lot of people had lost our ways, both of us personally, and regained our faith in recent years. But it's like, having an opportunity. I was one of those people that sat in back of the church after going through some family issues, and I didn't want to deal with anything. I mean, been in law enforcement over 26 years, and I didn't know really where a place for me was. And until safety and security came up, I'm like, wow, I can serve in my church on something that I know. And then it just made sense for me. And it was really cool. One of our lead pastors, and we've seen this in churches. We've worked with over 200 churches in the last 3 years. And we see this time and time again that, there are so many people out there that want to serve, but they might not otherwise serve in a different ministry. So taking all of this stuff, even building up a program or a team, but then making a ministry out of it. That's the beautiful part of it, because it's just that's what, it keeps your membership, and it keeps people interested, and just a sense of ownership to that.
And that's kind of one of the focuses that I've always had, is that, when you take out, and that's part of, like, when we talk about, when the church safety guys, we talk about training, equipping, and discipling. That's part of the disciple key.
Absolutely.
And it's, if you take away the ministry part of it, you have guys with guns guarding churches, right? So beyond that, it's like, okay, let's step back, kind of like what you guys do. Let's regroup. And let's look at this from a ministry standpoint, and maybe pull somebody that has experience in, but, how can we minister to that person? How can we give back to them and disciple them, and make sure that they have family growth, personal growth, that sort of thing. And I've found, for myself personally, I found that's pretty rewarding, because it's almost like if you're familiar with a church small group setting, the guys on my team, we have probably in, I don't know, almost 10 years, the highest ministry retention of any ministry in my church.
That's great.
And, when we sit down and we look at kind of the nuts and bolts, it's like, people find their place, they want to serve, and they know that, it's benefiting, the whole church and them as a whole. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah. A lot of people, they don't know that they feel that they're not qualified to be part of a ministry, so it's just like Troy said, it's a great opportunity to really bring people in that have skill sets that can really add value to a safety and security type team. And another thing that we really stress too, when we train teams, we train staff, is that we understand that they're there because of their faith. And you'd want to be careful not to overwork a specific small group in that team, because that will happen, where you get 4 or 5 guys that they're so kind of gung-ho, where they want to be the security team at every single service.
Every event.
There has to be a rotation, so they can still fulfill that need of attending a service and receiving the message. And
I hear often from my wife when she's like, "Hey,
are you working or worshiping?" Right? Yeah, no, I get that all the time too.
Take the take the earpiece out of your ear, turn your radio off.
Right.
But it's interesting you say that, because my opinion, and I know like we've talked about it before, but a big thing for us is, if somebody has a heart to serve, let's get them plugged in.
Right.
Let's teach them, let's train them, versus, and that might be the best person for that ministry, versus someone that's maybe been, a military Marine for Marine sniper shooter.
100% agree. Absolutely.
So, and I'm, at one point in time, I know at our church, our pastor kind of called it the veteran ministry, because we have so many veterans that serve and help. And that's
great.
That's fantastic. And it's great. But, a lot of times and I'm sure you guys have heard this, like, one of the biggest things is I'll have somebody come up and say, "Hey, can I join your team? Do I get a gun?" Like, that's the next thing.
Right. No,
and I'm
definitely.
like, okay, you just disqualified yourself, because I'm not really interested in.
Right.
No, we have a process too. We work through that, but often, people have come to us and said, "Hey, I'm just visiting a church, but I appreciate that you have policies and procedures solid in place to handle this stuff." And, a lot of times we have where my church is in Columbus, we have the pleasure of actually training with multiple law enforcement agencies.
Absolutely.
So when they come in and they train in room clearing, active shooter, all that stuff, they're like, okay, we're training with you guys. Let's move, let's do this together so that you guys know. And yeah, not everybody's blessed with that, that opportunity to be able to step in.
We recently did that this fall in Western Wisconsin, and it was one of the first times a church actually started the process of reaching out. And our local sheriff's office and police department knew what we had going in this church, and they reached out like, hey, can we, do a large scale response to an active threat? And we're like, well, absolutely. So on that training day, like you said, very blessed to just have the buy-in from everyone, from the police to sheriff's office to, we actually had a campus police, and then even the hospitals became involved, and then also the church safety and security team. So you have that whole mix of everything like you would, right? And that was just a perfect scenario for training. And it was really neat though, because from a training aspect of it, is working with that church is like, it gave them goals to build that up. Like, hey, listen, we're gonna be training with the police and then all of this. And it just, I think it instilled a lot of validation of what we were doing then too. And then on that day, when we had the moulage and all the victims and all that stuff, it was just like, wow, this is, that gave them that experience that maybe they didn't come from military law enforcement or fire services. It just gave them that experience. And it was just a beautiful thing. So
one of the, in the past, when we've done it before, we've actually brought in like Sunday school workers and church folks so they could see, okay, when you have an officer responding through the building with an AR or, responding to a threat, this is how they're going to handle it. This is what you do, and kind of developed like this interactive scenario with them. And the response that we got, and it wasn't necessarily, obviously it wasn't necessarily planned to scare people, but to increase their awareness and be able to say, hey, wait a second, and from their standpoint, we had more folks come to us after and say, we really appreciate what you guys did, because, that added realism to it. One of the things we did is we shot blanks off in the building. And so the sound, just the sound of what a gunshot sounds like in a all steel and concrete building is entirely different from going to the range. And,
and it's funny, like you said, I think one of our biggest takeaway was obviously on the law enforcement side. Those guys had a lot with just dealing with the facilities and knowing safety and security was in there, but also from the church and congregation standpoint and the role players, they only know what they know from TV, right? Or what they hear, and they think, cops are going to come in blazing as soon as they get here. They don't realize that cops drop flashlights, or we have to breach a door, however that works. And they're like, wow, we see now the value of that from the time of the incident to that 4 minutes of, you know what I mean? That's what law enforcement on site. So it just gave them that realistic view that through, you can tell them in training or whatever, but that's just one of the big takeaways that we heard time and time again. It's like, okay, we understand now why we have to prepare ourselves for that 1 to 4 minutes of an incident, and how valuable that is for life-saving skills.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cool. Well, Michael, do you have any questions for these guys?
Hey, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I don't know. Something's up with my mic. I don't know what's going on. No, I'm just, thinking about the going through with the other people, as far as like the door greeters and that kind of thing. What's kind of the mentality as far as bringing them into training, and where does that stop? And then you move into the actual security guys. So I know you want to tell them a little bit, but maybe you don't want to tell them everything that's going to happen or everything that's going on, just your group.
Sure. And I could, tell you from our experience that what we see. So you'll probably hear us when we're talking, we're just not saying team all the time. We're kind of saying program, because a lot of times, so when we're contacted and we go in, they have no idea if they even want a sanctioned team or, a organized team. So we kind of say, okay, let's start with the program. Okay. So who do you have for your local resources? Your greeters, your ushers, your whatever that looks like, because every church is different that way. And we can start that training process and the whole working through everything with those people. But once the church or the boards or the pastors, sometimes if the pastors don't buy in right away, it's like, wow, now we see the need of go-to people. But if we're having ushers and greeters, are we going to put that on them too, or how? You know what I mean? So I think you bring up such a valuable thing, because I would say probably about maybe 30% of the churches that we have worked in and are currently working in, they might not have a sanctioned team yet, but by the time we're done training with them and the people they have identified in their program, they can see how valuable it is and the need to have them go to people just for safety and security. And then you have some teams out there, and it works different for every church, that have integrated medical program, right, with security, which makes sense for some churches. We've been blessed to work with another church, very, very large, that has a separate medical team, because that just makes sense for them. So it's really looking at the local assets that they have, the vision of the church and the goals, and how to implement all of the safety and security and on what they want. And because no matter what you, James, we all say, at the end of the day, it's their church, their community, their culture. You just have to find how that fits. And we can do that through a foundational approach.
Sure. And that brings up an awesome point too. When I first started, I was actually in charge of the medical side.
Okay.
And we had two separate teams. And then as we started reevaluating things and kind of seeing, okay, where's this ministry going? What do we want to do? Mm-hmm. We stepped back and we said, okay, for us, because, we're an odd size. We fluctuate from about 800 to 1,100 per service.
Sure.
And so for us, being in kind of that weird niche, I guess, we have probably 30 to 35 folks that regularly serve with safety. And so when we looked at that and we looked at scheduling and all that fun stuff, it really just came back to, it makes sense to train everybody the same way, bring everybody together, and then assess their personal needs. But then, from this point forward, say, okay, everybody's getting certified on this, this day,
absolutely.
And then, and honestly, I mean, we handle it like, as far as response, any incident that comes out, we have a dispatch office where they watch cameras, radios, that person field stuff. We have, we always have two people responding with a supervisor. That supervisor calls the shots, and then we have backup teams and unmarked teams and all that fun stuff.
And that's awesome that when you have that luxury, right? But when you look at a church with 100 people, that if you're not from that congregation, you walk through the door and kind of the music stops type of thing, right? So the dynamics are it's really interesting. But I think, like you said, is one of the things that we drive through all of our training. It's just not the safety and security team. It needs to be a program. And part of that program is getting the communication key, the buy-in, and the awareness from staff members, because it's very important. If you have, let's say, a director of children's ministry, and that person, he or she might have 500 kids back in a children's ministry, and all of a sudden we have to evacuate, maybe it's even for severe weather or whatever, but they need to understand all that too, of how the team is going to help direct, or the program, or or you go up to a critical incident. They need to know, these doors will be locked, the expectations then of those responding to that. So it's very important to, like you said, and I think that's one of the most challenging things.
Yeah.
And it's trying to find what fit is right for what church.
Every staff member, every volunteer has to have some buy-in and some participation. Sure. Because it takes all of them to really put the response plan together. And they need to understand up front that not every member of the team is going to be or needs to be carrying a firearm, right? Sure. There's just going to be a handful of people that may have that skill that will train to do that. And so you just got to take that time to sit down with all of your staff members, all your volunteers, if you take time to, we take time to interview them, we speak with them so we can understand what their skill set is. We can find how that's going to apply to that program. And show them where they can really add value. And hey, we're working with volunteer armies, right? So they need to have that sense of purpose, and they need to feel like they belong. And it's very important that they have that ministry, that they form that ministry, so they know that they're not just serving because they have this experience, but they're also serving the church. They're serving the flock.
So how do you guys handle it for and we get asked this question a lot, so I'll throw this to you guys.
Yeah. Hey.
So you go and half of the church leadership says we want something, and the other half says we don't want anything. How do you address that? How do you or maybe is there something you can say to our watchers or listeners that would kind of give them a hint to say, okay, I'm going to go to my pastor or leadership and I'm going to talk to them about this, and what can I say to get them to buy in? Because maybe I have a pastor that is like, absolutely not. We're not dealing with
I like to turn that around a little bit to them.
Sure.
And I start asking them, look, what are your safety and security goals? And what is your current plan to achieve them?
Sure.
What steps are you taking to do that? And when they start explaining to me what their goals are,
Mm-hmm.
they're really telling me how to talk to them.
Sure.
And like Troy said, every church is different.
Right.
They're not the same. So our approach, we may have the same foundational approach, but for us to get from A to Z,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be a different path with every single church.
Sure.
So you really got to take the time to understand leadership group, understand what their goals are and what they're trying to achieve, and then take them down that path. And then you will also achieve your goal of getting your safety and security team together, because they're asking you to do it, but they want you to do it to achieve their goals. But you just got to show them that there's more spokes in the wheel, that
Sure.
they might be addressing 2 or 3, but you might got to say, hey, there's 8 or 9 spokes in the wheel. Let's
Right.
address all of them. So I like to turn it around.
And I think another key concept too, James, to kind of hit a little more on that is, we're dealing with volunteers, we're dealing with churches, and we know that sometimes churches don't work as fast as we want it to. So if we have that good idea factory about safety and security, we like to look at it as planting seeds almost. Let's not try. So, in my prior life, I'm used to running a specialized tactical team. And if I needed something, I said, hey, I need this, and I got it, right? But that's not
Sure.
reality in church. And that's one thing that I've learned over the past few years too, of working with volunteer teams, especially in the setting, is that we need to plant these little seeds along the way. So when the unfortunate event happens again, that pulls that media of attention, we all know that people react on emotion, right? Or there's something happens out there that these seeds are planted, and we're going to continue to water these seeds just a little bit too. So, we might have the best intentions, and you go running into your pastor's office, you need to do this. Well, we look at it and say, you know what, let's not be that enforcer, but let's be an ambassador of safety and security. So let's
Sure.
plant that seed, let's water it, and let's just work on little baby steps, right? A building block approach to get us someday to where we want. But the vision might take what we in our eyes might think it should be a month, 3 months, or 6 months, but maybe it's laying it out over a 3-year process, and that's one thing that we have found where people have had a lot of success of, number one, of just maybe getting to a forum or a conference like this here in Green Bay. It just plants that seed, and then you start asking them questions, what if? And then arming people, I guess, with that information or them seeds to go out and to start, planting and start watering then, and then just start being part of their church and saying, what, have we thought about this, or what makes you feel uncomfortable? And that's one thing when we interview, 20 to 30% of the volunteers at a certain church, we learn so much information. And a lot of time it's that miscommunication. It's like, oh yeah, I've always thought about that door. I know how to defeat that, but I've never said anything. But yet we hear it from the majority of the people. So again, it's like, having that proactive mindset, get those seeds, get them watered, and just continue on that, and just take what you can get when you can, as you know, right? I mean, if you get a budget, hey, that's awesome, but I think that's a hard time. It's very hard, or it gets very discouraging when we don't get that traction or maintain the traction. But we have to understand the environment we're working in, and the dedication.
That's probably, is that the third most asked question, Michael, in the group? I mean,
Yeah.
We get it a lot, which is, how do we talk to the leadership?
Right.
Like, how do we communicate? And, I think I said this last week with one of the other guys we had on, but, how do you eat the elephant, right?
Mm-hmm.
One piece at a time. So, for where we are, and it sounds like if I explain, and I've told you guys a little bit about like my team at home,
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like, oh wow, they're great, they got a budget, they got all this stuff. but that's a work of 10 years plus,
Absolutely.
in the process. So I'm grateful, from my experience, that from day one, my leadership, my pastors were like, okay, we want to grow the church. This makes sense because I think it was Barna Research that said did some research a few years ago that said if a church wants to grow in size, I think like one of the top 5 ways for it to grow was to have a safety team and actually be safe, because that's
Right.
what different generations of people are coming in, and
The expectation
for.
now.
Right.
Expectations.
Right. So from that standpoint, that's, and like I said, 10, 12, 15 years to where we are now, it's hard to keep that in perspective when you want 30 cameras and 60.
Well, it's just like,
NVRs.
it's very easily related to a professional athlete like Michael Jordan. All we see is the best basketball player of all time, on opinion, of course.
Sure.
But what we don't see is that, the failures and the setbacks and the little details that he took every day to get to where he's at. And it's
Sure.
like you said, that was a span of 15 years or whatever it was for him to.
Failing forward.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
It's
So
important. And I want to reiterate one thing that Troy said. It's really important. We know that there are a lot of men and women attending church that really want a safety and security team, and they're beating their heads against the wall, and they're very passionate about getting a team started and walking in to leadership, to the boards, to the councils, to the pastor, and saying, we need to do this right now is not going to get you anywhere. How we suggest you water those seeds is bringing things to their attention that are being reported in the news, like White Settlement, Texas, where you say, did you see the news? Did you see what happened in White Settlement, Texas? Horrible tragedy.
Sure.
We're praying for everybody that was involved with that. Hey, I just want to ask you a question. What would we do if that were to happen at our church? Are we prepared for that? Is there something more that we can do to prepare for that?
Sure.
And get their wheels turning. And they'll start, and then it'll be their idea. They'll start thinking, maybe we should think about putting a safety and security team together. Maybe we should start locking that door.
Right.
Maybe we should put some cameras in. And their brain will start to go there because they want to protect their flock too.
Sure.
And so just feed the seeds. Don't slam them.
It's honestly an ongoing process.
Absolutely.
Even once you get there,
Yeah.
we after White Settlement, I sat down with one of our pastors who handles a lot of our finances, and he's like, "Oh my goodness, did you see?" And I said, "Yeah, I saw that." So let's talk about that.
Yeah.
This gentleman came in and he asked for. So there's a lot of folks that think it was a burglary related or things. So with the money, how do we handle, let's ask, and that's what I did. I said,
what's our benevolence program look
right.
like?
I'm like, what does this look like during the week when a homeless person or somebody come in and they're like, hey, who's addressing that? Who's hanging around with the sweet secretaries that we have, that are by themselves? How do we handle, we had, actually, I think it was about a month ago, we had a lady, some of the area churches. And when they didn't, she come in and say, hey, I want money for my program. When they didn't give her cash, then she claimed to run each of the churches.
Sure. Wow.
And so we were contacted by a church that said, hey, giving you guys a heads up, she's hitting all this size churches.
Yep.
So I went to one of our pastors and he's like, oh yeah, that lady came in 2 weeks ago. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Why
So
it's really important to network with your churches and see if you're
Absolutely.
dealing with the same people.
Let's talk about that. But yeah, absolutely. And with your leadership to say, hey, if you have somebody that comes in and says, give me money or else, guess what?
Yeah.
We should be picking up the phone and
Call that a clue in law enforcement. That's a clue. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
But it's good. It's good stuff. Hey, Michael, did you have any other questions?
No, I think I'm good.
Sweet. Okay. So we kind of went around the questions. That's fine. You
All
guys
right.
covered 10
good.
times better. But probably final wrap-up question. What would you say to a church starting off, a church under 500? Because you mentioned it earlier,
Mm-hmm.
if you have, 90% of the churches in the U.S. are under 500.
Mm-hmm.
So I know personally and I've talked to churches where they have one person that does, firearms, medical, first aid kit, everything for a church of 100. But what would you tell that person, like, to help them if you were trying to get them going in a good direction?
Well, first of all, I can take that first part of it there, Dave. No, first of all, I'd say plug into something like what you guys have going here. This is awesome. I mean, and just this is such a great platform of just to get the information out, what's going on.
Sure.
Hear people that are experienced, like what you talked about with, what you have going down there. I think that's just so valuable right now, and using the technology that essentially is free, right? I mean, everyone has the internet and a smartphone, and knows of Facebook pretty much. So I think number one, that's a great way of getting in a community of like-minded people. And then also of people that you can trust. And then if I was that one person in a small church, I wouldn't want to network with other churches or other, people that have that same type of mindset going forward. And maybe it might not be in a church setting, may be in a business or some type of a community program that is more like what we talk about. We want to respond to stuff instead of react. So we want to really look for, things that I guess I would want to look for someone or some partnership, friendship, whatever that is, just to get with a like-minded person, and then look at your resources too. I mean, no matter where we live in the United States, we're covered by police, fire, and EMS. And what a great way to start, of just reaching out saying, you know what, can I just get a walkthrough? I mean, I don't care if it's a career fire department or volunteer, it really doesn't matter. Sooner or later, they're going to want to get in, you know what I mean? And like to come through that. And so for their profession, they could, so why not be able to capitalize on that? And then, attend programs like this, conferences in Green Bay, again, just taking what you have and learn and start that slow process of just building. And as you guys probably can attest to too, it's infectious once it gets going, because for instance, one guy on my safety and security team, who is now an acting director, he has no military, law enforcement, emergency services background, but yet he had those gut feelings that we had, right? What if this were to happen?
Sure.
Now he's one of our best people because he's had an open mind and surrounded himself with the group and to be able to, work in this and just achieve a lot. So I would say, again, plug into things that are very easy, like what you guys have going here, programs that are validated, get with emergency services, police, whatever that looks like in your community. At least start there, and then have that open transparency within your church with your staff or your pastor or whatever that looks like, and just say, we need to do something, or, have you ever considered this?
Sure.
I agree with Troy 100%. And the only thing I would add to that is there's probably a church in your community that you can connect with that has a safety and security team. Go over there and meet with them, maybe get involved in some of their training, and then find a good model out there, and then, go after it, bring that back to your church and start planting those seeds with your own church. But, plugging into these podcasts, getting on a Facebook page, coming to conferences, starting to plug into the system will help you develop the right mindset for your church, because only you really truly understand the culture at your church and what's going to be acceptable and what's not, and what that program should look like.
Sure.
And work with professional security consultants. Look, we're not the only ones out there. There's a lot of security consultants out there across the United States that have the experience and have the training that can come and help you and guide you and work with you to find those solutions and develop a good program and get the right training. There are professionals out there that are ready to work with you. So it's really important to just use your resources. It really is.
We all got the same mission here. I mean, we just
Sure.
want to protect our people of faith and our houses of worship. And at the end of the day, take that proactive first step to do something.
Sure. Something's always better than nothing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Take action.
Take action. That's right.
Yeah, I'll throw one more thing out there too. I know something I just spoke to my pastor about is creating kind of a cop stop type situation where a police officer or first responder, they can stop in, get a cup of coffee, use the bathroom. You guys that have been in law enforcement before, sometimes just not having to go into a convenience store and come out blind out of a bathroom is, these days, you never know what's going to happen. So just creating a safe environment, even for them to be able just to use the restroom. And again, grab a cup of coffee. It allows you to shake hands, get to know those guys, because that's who's going to respond to your church in the event that something happens. So those guys that are patrolling in there.
Absolutely. And like you said, coming from that, especially that law enforcement background, where are we always, and even on the fire side too, what are we always looking for as trainers? We're looking for new venues, right? They're hard to find. And if you offer that up to them, you will have friends for life. And then, like you said, getting your firefighters, your EMTs, whatever training that looks like, get them through your facility, establish that relationship. We're not saying you have to do a full-blown exercise like we've been blessed to do, right?
Sure.
But it's just starting that communication. And you're exactly right. Give them that safe place, coffee, water, whatever that is. And that's going to go miles and miles.
Yeah, all of our clients, everybody that we work with, we tell them, hey, make sure that you stock up on water and coffee and make it known to your local, at least your local law enforcement officers, that this is a safe place for them to stop and get a cold drink or a hot drink and use the bathroom.
It's good stuff.
Great stuff.
Not too long ago, I had an officer. He was eating his dinner in his squad car out under our one of our vestibule covers, and I walked up to him and he rolled his window down real quick and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to disturb you guys. I'll move." And I said, "No, I just wanted to come out and thank you for parking here and eating your dinner. Can I get you some water or something?" And he's like, "No, I'm good." And he's like, "I thought you were going to be mad at me." And I'm like, "No, why would I be mad at you? Enjoy your dinner, your peace and quiet, holler if you need anything," and kind of introduce myself to him. But yeah, it was a good
I know we're
thing.
getting on time, but just one quick story, like you said, I think just really hits a nail on the head here too. So coming off of that big exercise and the amount of time we spent with local law enforcement, it was about 3 or 4 months down the road after that, I got a call. I was out of town, and here there had been a big apartment fire, had displaced a bunch of people not too far from the church. And because of that relationship, they knew about the church and the capabilities of what they could handle and stuff. We were actually able to take those people in temporarily until the Red Cross got set up and kind of started that whole thing. Sure. And it really happened with, one phone call and having that relationship, and the amount of people that came forward in the church to serve during that incident was just, it was really heartwarming, and that was really cool. So you just never know what's going to happen if it's no matter where you live, a hurricane, a tornado, maybe a wildfire. We're all prone to different natural disasters, and it goes both ways, and we can serve in many more capacities. And I think we really understand that ripple effect.
And after an experience like that, you'll end up with more church members.
Absolutely.
Because they for the first time saw inside the walls of that church, and they saw the power of faith.
Sure.
And they said, "Wow, this is a really incredible church."
That church at that point, it's not just, okay, this happened, here you go, but the church can actually minister and carry it forward to say, okay, how can we invest in you to get you on to the next thing,
right?
And your family. So, it's kind of a cyclical process.
Cycle. Exactly.
Hey, let's do that. So.
Awesome.
But cool. I appreciate you guys hanging with me for a little bit tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks. All right. We'll shake hands over there. There you go. There you go.
Fun stuff. All right. Well, if you want to go ahead, we'll go ahead and just close it up for this evening. But real quick, I just want to shout out to Trinity Security Allies for sponsoring this month's broadcast. So I appreciate their partnership. And you can check them out at trinitysecurityallies.com. And also check out our new website at churchsafetyguys.com. We've got some great stuff on there. So thank you, Michael. I think we will call it an evening. So take care, guys. God bless.
No, thanks, guys.